welcome to this panel. It's titled Voices from the Sector, NGO Perspectives on the CSR Opportunity. And we're all really excited to be here. Thanks, Gayatri, for that lovely introduction. Before we just jump into it, and I guess a lot of the context setting has already been done. And so I think to follow up on the context setting, I think the way we see our job here really on this panel is to share stories, right, of effective engagement between corporates, between CSR and non-profit organizations. We have a room, as Gayatri said, filled with India's leading social enterprises, both non-profits as well as some social businesses. And so it's been actually quite difficult in selecting which ones to put here because we have such a great cohort and they're all sort of more towards the back of the room. But I think we've collected three curated organizations here that all have very relevant experience of deep engagement with the corporate sector over the last several years. Just to put a few numbers out there, so we know, to give ourselves a little bit more context. Over the last 5 years or so, cumulatively across these three organizations, they've received roughly about 20 crores of funding from corporates. Very much like those in the room, yeah. And of course, with that funding and other contributions, again, cumulatively, these three organizations have actually positively impacted the lives of over 550,000 children and girls, as well as some other beneficiaries. So we're going to share stories, and we're going to also talk about, through those stories hopefully, what really needs to be done to make this opportunity real. I think someone brought up the very valid point in the Q&A that this has been a fairly vibrant sector for a while. It's not entirely new, right? The engagement has been going on. Of course, the non-profit sector has been doing what it's doing, and corporates have been engaging as well. So is this really a game changer, right? And I think what we're going to, through our discussion and stories, is focus on what can we do and what stories can we get from this side of the coin from the organizations in terms of what can make this opportunity more real, right? What will really help us hit the ground running, what will really help us start absorbing much larger amounts of funding, do a lot stronger reporting, and just have, and take the support that the corporates are giving beyond just the funding, beyond just the money, to have truly great partnerships, right, and build those relationships. So with that, just a few points on logistics. I'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves for 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll have 30 to 35 minutes of Q&A just amongst myself and the panelists, questions for each of them, and questions specifically targeted some to bring out a few key points and stories. And we'll leave the last 10-15 minutes open to everyone for questions, and you can just shoot those right in. Great. So with that, why don't we start with a round of introductions, and Raj, we can start with you.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to our partner is always in the crime, Dasra, and all of you attending this workshop today. Very happy to be introducing the work done by Lend a Hand India, as well as what we have been able to do in the corporate space, working with them. So basically, Lend a Hand India is a NGO working at the intersection of education and livelihood. So we basically introduce vocational training as part of the school curriculum for the secondary schools. So we have focused on 8th, 9th and 10th grade students, introducing this vocational training as they are studying their curriculum. We have seen that the curriculum or the education we have in India is too much rote method, too much academic and book oriented. So our attempt is that how do we bring the outside world, which is a real life world of making money, getting jobs, starting your business, into our own way, into these lives of 8th, 9th and 10th grade students. We set up the workshop in the school, then recruit local carpenters, plumbers, electricians from the communities around, and then 1 full day a week, our students, boys and girls, both learn right from welding, carpentry, plumbing, agriculture, gardening in Mumbai now, and other places too. So currently we are in about 100 schools covering about 13,000 students. And Maharashtra is our major footprint with Gujarat, Karnataka, Goa and UP as the other states that we are working on. And just you might have seen 2 days before, the vocational education will be introduced as a 100 marks subject now in the 9th and 10th grade. So we played a major role in pushing for that sort of policy change. And from next year, our course also will be recognized as part of that 100 marks. So it will definitely help the adoption of the schools across the state. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Raj. Kalyani.
Yeah, thank you. I come from an organization called the NAS Foundation India Trust, and NAS means taking pride. We've been working for the last 16 years on issues of HIV and sexuality. Actually in the news a lot with the whole decriminalization of Section 377 and fighting with the government and refiling a petition to get homosexuality out of Section 377. But with this work with sexuality, we've also been doing a lot of work with HIV, training organizations across the length and breadth of the country to address the HIV epidemic. So looking at care issues, we set up one of the first homes for children living with the infection in Delhi. We also had a large home-based care initiative, training other organizations to respond to the infection as well as helping people living with the infection on how do they manage opportunistic infections and ARV. With this journey, we also realized that there was this whole group of young women who were in monogamous relationships, people coming to antenatal clinics, married at 16, coming to the antenatal clinic at 17 and testing positive. We had done years of work with HIV prevention and realized that we had not really made enough of a difference. You know, behavior change communication, giving out flyers, and still there were many young women who were testing positive. So we said, why not look at prevention through another lens? And the other lens was really dramatic because we decided to use the medium of sport. And in 2006, we piloted a program called GOAL, reaching out to adolescent girls between the ages of 12 and 19, using the medium of sport, a sport called netball, a cousin of basketball, and life skills. We were very unsure if it would work, but right from the journey we had Standard Chartered Bank who worked with us on building this program, and now we've run it for 7 years. The program has worked well in India. The same model is being implemented in about 21 countries world over and reaching out to millions of girls. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kalyani.
Hi, I am Parvez, working with an organization called Educate Girls. We have a specific mandate of bringing back out-of-school girls into mainstream education, and we primarily work with the government schools. Presently, we are working in 6 such critical gender gap districts in Rajasthan, covering around 7,500 odd schools and reaching out to around 500,000 students. And we have identified statistically, what all pockets we have to be in, and encourage the community to bring back schools and negotiate with them to eliminate the barriers which are limiting the enrollment of such girls into the mainstream school education system. So we have our focus primarily on enrollment, retaining the girls into the education system, and then ensuring that they are also getting learning to improve quality of their life. Because what they learn into this school system, they go back with those learnings into their own families, and that can bring change what is a larger goal what we have in our mind. And the aspiration, yes, we have a huge task ahead, and probably I'm in particular looking at this forum to interact with this forum and see how we can partner and take this forward.
Great, thanks so much, Parvez, and thanks to all the panelists for those introductions. And now that we know a little bit more about the organizations and what they've been up to, Raj, a question for you, and then we'll move the same question around the panel. Let's get into what role has CSR and corporate philanthropy played in doing the work that you do, and if we can draw on 1 or 2 examples of effective engagements where it's really worked well, and try and think about what really made it click, what made it, made that engagement truly effective, that I think would be really useful.
Sure. So I think the corporates or the foundations which are set up by the corporate have played essential integral part in the growth of Lender in India where we are today. Prime example of that can be, Axis Bank Foundation, which were our actually first institutional donors. So actually they made us, help us transition from a retail-based fundraising model to the institutional model. So we owe, a lot to Axis Bank Foundation, and with them, it was not only funding per se, but the type of due diligence we went through with them as part of the foundation, the rigorous due diligence they had, and getting ready for us to many more due diligence like that, going forward was the biggest contribution from their side. Then we worked with, we are still working with Godrej Agrovet, where they have provided us capacity building support in terms of curriculum development, as well as training our trainers, because we work, mostly our work in the rural India, and we are launching in Mumbai next week actually. So they have helped us with the agriculture content, the curriculum development, as well as training the trainer. Or we have been working with Mahindra, they are doing more on the tractors and the automobile training as well. We have been working with Gen Irrigation on the drip irrigation, with JP Morgan Chase on setting up our workshop or developing software for our alumni tracking system, as well as setting up sort of online kiosk where people can go for the online admissions, which parents need a lot of help nowadays, especially if you don't have access to internet or anything. And we work with UBS on developing curriculum for the financial literacy, and their employees are actually delivering that curriculum as well. And with Vodafone, with their mobile app, they helped us to develop the specifications for the mobile app which we are developing to keep track of the delivery which is being made in various schools. So I just gave a laundry list of these, but I wanted to give some very specific examples of how these corporates have met our non-funding needs in a very tactical way. And I want to emphasize the word tactical here because the engagements have been successful because they were clearly defined, and the result was clearly defined, the target was clearly defined, and it was designed in such a way that it was value addition to the non-profits. The reality of most of the this kind of effort has been that it's a big drain on the NGO sector when suddenly 20 people come and the NGO has 3 staff and being able to service them. So what we made sure that any of these engagement when we did, we were very realistic about what we can, you get what you give. So basically what we will be able to give in order to manage this kind of engagement working with the corporate. And many times there is a paradox, the people who need the volunteer engagement are the smaller non-profits, but at the same time those are the non-profits who don't have ability to manage the volunteers. The bigger ones which have the volunteer, they probably don't need the volunteer support, right? So there is a paradox here. So I think that's where somewhere the corporates also can help to break that, break this cycle, where if you are able to devote more towards the volunteer management as compared to the non-profit, that will be one good thing to do. Secondly, as well as having long-term engagement. So none of these things which we did were sort of one-day quick shot or anything like that. We made sure that they were long-term over the period, so that even the satisfaction we employee are getting are much more in that in that process. And third was having a regular interaction on almost once every 2 weeks, making sure that one of the founders or one of the CEO also is getting involved into that, because we view this employee engagement as not end all and be all of this, but many more things to come.
Great, thanks. And actually, that's a good segue into your example, Kalyani. You can talk to us a little bit more about the long-standing relationship that NAS Foundation has with Standard Chartered Bank and the Gold Program, and give us sort of a flavor for that, but also I guess touch on this theme of employee engagement and beyond, support beyond just the money.
Yeah. Standard Chartered Bank had 2 global initiatives before. They have a huge program called Seeing is Believing, where they look at cataract and eye surgeries world over. They also have a program called Living with HIV, where they train their staff to get trained on HIV issues and disseminate information. So after 2 large initiatives, they wanted to look at a third initiative. And with their diversity and inclusion mandate, and with this intention of bringing more women employees into the bank, they thought that the best thing would be to invest in girls. And India is of course a large market. We have enough adolescent girls. We have a lot of women who are not really investing, are not contributing to the economic force. So for the bank, it was very strategic to say, after 2 global initiatives, it makes sense to look at adolescent girls. For NAS Foundation, we had worked only one with another corporate before, which was Johnson & Johnson, and they had given money to the care home. So we were very skeptical about working with a corporate. You know, we always had traditional grant fundings, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, and suddenly having a bank being interested, we went into it with a lot of concerns. And having said that, this is our 7th year of partnership. So I think it is done really well, and it was not about just the money, because the bank had only a concept when they came to us. They were like, we want to work with young women, we want to use sport, we want to work in India, that's about it. The entire concept of developing the program, the communities that we would take the program to, what kind of resources we needed, the curriculum, everything was done by NAS Foundation. So in the sense, I realized that we received a lot of support which says, yes, we're putting in the money, but this is the reasons why we are getting into this. So I think that clear expectation from the corporate to say that it's not only about employee volunteering, this is our focus. We want to be associated with, we are here for good. We want to make that good, and the good for us looks like making change in the lives of adolescent girls. I think that clarity of expectations was very good for us. Of course, the bank also had the expectation of employee volunteering. They have the 2 EV days. I heard someone talking about employee volunteering days. They do give 2 days off. They want people to go and make that difference. But so we had those clear opportunities. And we were also clear that it was not about planting trees. I have nothing against planting trees, but the point is that if we are working with young women in schools, why should we go into some vague location and plant 1,000 trees where we don't know who look after them? So we had that whole discussion to say, yes, you want to make a difference. These are young women. Where can we bring it? And it's not going to be about just Literacy Day and World AIDS Day. So the space that we found as common ground and good was that we had young women who needed skills. We're talking about English skills. We're talking about computer literacy. That was where the bank could definitely step in. And if you look at the goal curriculum, one of the main pillars is financial literacy. And as an NGO, our skills were more toward the developmental side, you know, communication and self-esteem. But the bank staff they got involved in developing the financial literacy module because that's their core competence, but also helping us deliver the financial literacy model. So every participant who went through the model actually visited the bank, saw how a bank functioned, the ATM, signing a check, how money came in. So this piece of saying that yes, we get involved, but the volunteering is just not something which is say, I logged in my days, but how do I make a difference? The last piece I want to talk about is that once this became big, they realized that it was scalable. And very often there's this question to say, does the NGO say we'll just scale it all around the country? What if the corporate itself wants to take it to scale? Because they have so many other markets in the world. And interestingly, they took the program to 6 other countries, Nigeria, Jordan, China, and Zambia. And it worked well. They done it for 3 years, and they realized that it could become bigger. And then this question to say, should a corporate be running a program on scale like that when their main business is banking? So should they then go and set it up all over the world? And in 2011 and 2012, they decided to hire an international NGO. They realized that this program had a lot of value. The number of volunteers were getting engaged, but more than anything, it had a big difference in the lives of young women. So they decided to hire an organization called Women Win. And today the program is there in 21 countries. So they have a partnership where they're working with them to run this program. But the foresight to say that yes, maybe we can't manage it, and that's not what we should be doing. So what are the systems that we need to set up to make this happen? You know, because the money is coming from their London office. So what are the resources that we need in India? What are the systems that the NGO can access and work with to make this implement on the ground in each country? I think that was useful.
Thanks. Parvez, the perspective from Educate Girls, and I guess the balance between both the pro bono support which your organization has received quite a a fair amount of, but also the need for financial support and the combination of those two rather than in isolation.
So as far as Educate Girl goes, we have been very fortunate to have partnerships with corporates where we benefited from the unrestricted point of view of we were allowed to spend the money the way we wanted to, and the need of the hour was capacity building. So there was a corporate who came forward and said that yes, you have a need of capacity building, here is the money, and just go ahead with it. At the same time, the commitment from our end was that after building that capacity, what impact are we going to have on beneficiaries? We tried to create a link, and then from our side, we proactively went to the partners and said that these are the targets what we have achieved thanks to your contribution. Having said that, there have been several experiences of not only the financial partnerships but also about the pro bono, where we didn't have internal capacities, and the corporates have come forward and helped us build our strategic plan. They try to help us understand and give us a vision of where we can look at, considering the various factors, what the dynamics what we call, and how we are going to mitigate those dynamics and achieve the aspiration. At the same time, the heavy investments, as far as, for example, there is a mobile tracking software what we have got developed from a corporate pro bono partner, which is a part of our information strategy, and which has actually helped us eliminate the time what we used to take to compile and get the information for decision making. So that type of a support was very much available to us, and it has helped us to grow. And I would say also that the organizations have offered their manpower wherever needed. Like one of the corporates, LGT, has helped us bring in 2 fellows and help us in our communication strategy. They have helped us in our fundraising strategy, which was not existing so far. And we had this realization of, if we are talking about scaling up, if we have this idea of where we want to reach, then we need these things in place for which we don't have any experience. So these elements from the corporate partnerships helped us take it to a next level.
Yeah, great. No, thanks for that. And I think one theme here, something that we've touched on, is that each of y'all have actually had these, I guess what's been important in making these conversations, these engagements with the corporates work to the mutual benefit of both sides, is that alignment, right? In what are in an alignment in terms of understanding what your core programs and what are the impacts that you all are trying to achieve, as well as what the funding goals of the corporates are, and how that actually ties in with the corporates CSR vision, and in some cases also on their business side, and how it might strengthen their competitive strengths in that department. But that's not always easy, right? That's easier said than done. Very often the typical relationship between the corporate, between the CSR divisions and, let's say, the non-profits we hear of is very little communication, right? And more of sort of the more traditional model is where clearly there are CSR imperatives, and there's a question of then going to the NGO and asking whether whether there can be a fit. In many cases, if there isn't a good conversation, it's a force fit, right? It's in an extension of programming somewhere which maybe did not make sense for the NGO. It doesn't tie in with what the NGO is actually trying to achieve, and that could lead to issues then when time comes around for reporting. It's sort of apples to oranges, right? Those needs aren't being met. So how have you all actually navigated those channels, negotiated or communicated, and actually ensured that the other side fundamentally understands what you all are trying to do, and then is aligned with that vision where, like I said at the start, it works to the benefit of both? And we can maybe have this question go around the panel.
Sure. Yeah, I think Vishal could not have described the challenges better. I mean, everything is not rosy, as we just pointed out. At the same time, it has taken a lot of efforts to come to that point, and I cannot agree with one of the point made earlier by the participant that should be DSI for CSR folks as well. And really, I mean, that would be something very, very useful, because This is a space which is new, and the development sector, even the people within development sector take years to understand what development sector is. So cannot fault or cannot blame the corporate folks that they'll have challenges to understand the same. Some of the things which we kept in mind as we entered into partnership is, one is that the timing of the grant as well as the need for the achieving the impact. Because many times the grant is, and that is typically the case, it's for 1 year, and by the time the due diligence is over and the money is in the bank, the 6 months are gone, and then you are left with 6 months. You cannot really do much within 6 months, for all practical purposes. If my next year renewal is dependent on achieving these indicators, it just doesn't fit. So we have been very careful in defining or sort of making sure that whatever is the time left, what we can achieve within that. That is one. So I would strongly suggest, and so most of the grants that we have gone for a multi-year grant, or sort of insisted on a multi-year grant as compared to single year, because so if you can provide for that kind of flexibility, that will be very, very helpful. That is one that is one part which was. Second, the reporting requirements, right, in terms of, because at the end of the day the corporate has to report what really happened, because that is what is going to prove and other things too. So you might so I think enough time should be devoted at the time of the due diligence itself to understand the program. Now it might be function of how many projects one CSR manager is looking at. If you have 25 projects, then hardly have any time to understand. You are just in a hurry to, okay, let me just clear this design. I have to get this check out of the way before 31st March. If that happens, then it's a setting of a failure, because you haven't understood the program well, and in the process later on, if some indicator is not met, if some timeline is not there and other things, it may lead to friction later. So what we have also ensured is that making sure that the people that you are working with understand the program will be very transparent. There are times where we have actually accepted reduced funding that they're offering, because we said that I cannot spend this much money in 1 year. If you give me for 2 years, I can. But if you give me only for 1 year, and if you don't give me next year, it will leave a bigger hole in my budget next year. So there are times where I think even non-profits have to be careful about that, not to change your program just for the sake of getting funding, right? Because that is not going to, that may work for 1 year, you may get one check, but the subsequent check will not, arrive in the process as well. And third is that the reporting requirements can change over a period of time, because you may start with something, and as you start reporting, as your senior management start asking more questions, where is this money going, and other things which is, part of daily life, then I think there should be enough understanding between the NGO and the corporate, where, okay, if we need the increased kind of reports, or if we need more indicators, long-term indicators, whatever that is, then there should be increased provision in the budget itself, because most of the time the budget is provided for program, but not the analyzing the impact of that. And nowadays there is so much emphasis on impact assessment, but nobody wants to really pay for it, right? So at the end of the day, when you are, what we have done is try our best to make sure that we provide for those kind of budgets as well as we are structuring, the engagement.
Thanks so much.
I can just build on what Raj is saying with just two examples of, we tried doing something that we were not in the same situation, and it just worked out well. Because we piloted the program, it was in the interest of the corporate too, to say that if it works well here, then I need to show how it worked well. Only then I can take it to other markets, right? It's not just a one India example. You have to show saying that it's working well, and then we go and say we'll do it in 5 markets or 10 markets. So actually we were able to involve evaluation and M&E organization right at the beginning, because they had got Population Council to come and say that if it's worked well in India, why? And then a report with that effect to say that this has worked well, so now we'll take it to more countries. So that was something which we did early on. But also because the program was going to be taken to so many countries, we had this whole conversation of how are you going to create the systems for this, because if the funder is in London and the money is also coming from there, but you have so many stakeholders in India, because the bank has branches all over the country, and we were running the program only in 3 cities, which are the largest presence of the bank in India: Delhi, Mumbai and Chennai. So creating those systems where we had, a person who is representing the program and managing in London, but also having a representative in the India offices. So I think that system, as well as having a nodal contact person in the NGO. I think the clarity of communication was that we had these three people who knew who's representing the program and who's managing it for them. So we could also actually factor in for that person's time on the program. That worked well. We also had the frequency of communications really factored out well. Like Raj says, it's like you can't have, if someone who's like, we do have visitors, we have every 2 months some senior person coming in, but knowing over a calendar as to how it's going to look, how many senior people visit from the bank, what kind of expectations, I think that timeline and calendar setting together was really useful for us. In terms of impact, very early on we realized that if you're going to take the program to 10 other countries, it may be worthwhile to get collective impact. You know, if you're using the same tool and if you're working with the same target community, is there any way, factoring in the local contexts which are different, can you use the same tool to show larger impact? And 3 years ago we signed up for a cloud computing system which was Salesforce for all the partners on this program. And we devised ourselves with what the outcomes and the indicators were. And I think that's important that we know what the corporate was looking for. We know what they're expecting, which are the indicators which are important to them, which could be the increase in confidence, which could be the employability piece, how many girls are actually completing college or school, those parameters which they needed. How do we incorporate it and put it into a system that works for us? You know, so that system working it together, this is our 3rd year of using the online platform. Yes, there are issues because there's so many countries who are using it, but I think it has made life easier for us because we know what we're getting into and what to expect.
Sure. Thanks. So I think Vishal, most of the points have been covered by both Raj and Kalyani. But the experience, I would like to focus upon more of not a financial relationship but a pro bono relationship, and we have faced some challenges there. Yes, it's not as good always. That there are some commitments which are being made, but at the same time, when it comes to delivery, it takes its own time, and there is where the fight begins. Of there are some organizational targets what we have to achieve depending upon this particular relationship what we are having, and if we are not getting the right support at the right time, the project suffers, and there is where we have felt this disconnect. We had to sit multiple times. We had to sit and make them understand about the practical implications of this type of relationship. We achieved what we wanted, but at the same time the request from our end, this sector end, is that probably when we are committing something, see to it that it has a specific timeline and we deliver on those timelines, because understandably, and I think you all will acknowledge that it has implications as far as the direct beneficiary is concerned. So we cannot have any compromises there. So that's the perspective which I wanted to share on that.
Great, thanks so much for that, Parvez. You actually, I like how you're doing this. You're always touching on the topics that then segue us into the next piece. And you started off with sort of the word challenges, which is particularly interesting and something that I wanted us to get into. We've obviously discussed what's worked well and what are the steps that proactive measures that you all had to take to ensure that these engagements are fairly effective, as well as what was then done by the corporates on the other side to make it work. And so we have some sense of, well, if you don't do that, then things don't actually work. But just to bring the challenges up to the forefront, what really hasn't sort of worked well? Have you, what kind of issues have you faced in trying to address them? So let's try and get sort of that side of it a little more before we then open it up to the crowd for questions.
So I think challenges in our case, and I think I alluded to some of those, during the past this thing as well. It is more in terms of that the corporate need to understand the NGO is not running the school, or they are not running. We are going to somebody, so we are also dependent on that school, or if we are running our program is part of the school, then we have to take the principles, permission there, dress code there, logistics, everything. We don't own that. So if we have our own facility of coming here, we can do whatever you want. But when we are on somebody else's premises, we are all the more dependent there, right? That is one
Yeah.
part of it. Second, the timing part. You know, everybody wants to get done within 1 or 2 hours, and nothing happens within 1 or 2 hours. You know, you might be able to get to the school, you know, probably by the time. So, in order to have meaningful, you know, engagement, even if, you know, even if number of hours per company remains the same, but the smaller number of employees devote those many hours, it will be much more helpful, right? In that case, I think the Vodafone is a, you know, classic example where they have chosen 30 employees every year and they stay with one, you know, NGO for 6 weeks, and we had somebody from Vodafone like that. But that really helped, because by the time you understand the non-profit work, it is 1 week gone, and last week is gone in wrapping up in everything. So we really had a good, you know, time with the volunteer to get something done, you know, in the process, right? And third being on the NGO side, like we are lucky at Lend a Hand that I myself come from corporate background. I worked with Citibank and Deloitte and other things. So I exactly know what is going on in that, you know, corporate person's mind as he's chasing me for the reports and what those pressures must be coming from. So we have tried our best to get actually their reporting format with us in the first place. They tell me in what format you are reporting, and I can, you know, fill it out for you as much as I can, and then you can take it from there. So even trying to make their life easy in terms of, you know, reporting numbers and all that, and being proactive about that has helped, you know, in that sense, right? And fourth, as I said, understanding the sector in general, you know, what are the challenges and what it is and otherwise too. And for that, we have, you know, whenever I have opportunity to speak to the grant maker or offline, and making them, you know, building that informal relationships with them, you know, has helped a lot, because then you understand each other's challenges much better rather than the email communication and conference calls, which can always lead to, you know, very structured, very formal communication. You don't end up understanding each other, right? In the process.
Yeah, great. Do you guys want to build on you?
Yeah. For me, challenges are immediately bringing me to opportunities, because one of the challenges we had with the program was that we had many adolescent girls who went through the program, graduated. We have a 10-month program, and then we take them back as peer leaders and even the coaches on the program. So they come back and train as coaches on the program. Once they finish that, what next? I realized that we were not going to be an employment agency, and vocational training was not our greatest forte. And much as I wanted to send all the girls to get Raj's vocational training program, he was in locations where we were not operating. So the question was, what happens next? And for the bank, the expectation of saying, yes, we want to show how many girls are today taking up jobs, that they are economically independent. And that's not something we could show, we could achieve ourselves. So this discussion to say then, what are the resources we can explore? And it fitted well where now we are on this pilot to say, the bank has a network of companies. They are various vendors, subsidiaries, their own customers, their clients who have other projects. Would it be possible for us to get the girls through a workplace readiness piece? So if they are trained on the various aspects of computer literacy, English, grooming, even soft skills, other soft skills, can we link them with economic opportunities? We started with just placing 3 girls from the program in Standard Chartered Bank, but we realized that we have thousands more. So this is one entire area which the corporate can then decide, how do we take this forward, yeah? The second challenge, actually we are only 5 minutes, yeah, okay.
Just a quick check, do we have 5 minutes for, and then we have Q&A, yeah?
The next challenge that I see is that you have an overseas agency investing, yeah, and what's the way forward? Because as we look at the new law, and when we say that if companies need to invest, this is still not coming from that investment perspective where they're keeping their profits away for investment. This was only as a part of their CSR initiative. And there is that distance. And how do we translate it where the bank in India takes responsibility? So to make this more sustainable, instead of all the decision making, the planning, the strategy decisions happening in London, how do we transfer where the India local offices take responsibility for this project? Yeah. Then it is more sustainable. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll just share one experience where we went for you know, making a pitch, and very positive, and we went there, you know, shared the deck and what we do, how we do, and you know what we achieve. And then after that, you know, the question came, ये तो सब ठीक है लेकिन आप करते क्या हो? And you know, it was so the challenges when I'm talking about, so it is also a matter of introspection for us of whether are we communicating in the right manner or not, and which is equally important, because when we are talking about partnership, it has to be two ways, it cannot be just one sided. We went back and we sat with the existing corporate partners and ran the same day, and they said that's perfectly all right, what's wrong in that? But then the dimension what we got was that probably that project actually needs to be shown as a business model, and that is what the learning what we got out of this interaction, which was again a challenging aspect for us of how do we develop a business model, where a corporate came in and gave their services about how we structure our pitch, what are the components, what may help the audience understand it better, and it will give the right message and what you want to convey. And yes, that worked well for us. But at the same time, what has happened with few of our interactions is that usually the corporates are very instructional. They forget that we are here at the ground level, we are doing some certain things, but at the same time they have a bird's eye view on certain aspects, which is good and which helps. But at the same time, we would want them to have more empathy and understanding of the situations with which NGO is working, and the circumstances under which the things, the way they are appearing, they are, and there is where the challenges.
So let me push you on that then, Parvez, a little bit. So and that clearly some kind of a gap, right, that you're talking about over here. What has worked and what is sort of the NGOs as far as the onus and where the responsibility lies, and clearly we need to meet both ways, right, at the sort of intersection. So what are some steps that you all have taken to actually bridge that gap, and has that actually played out well?
Yeah, so I can say that yes, and I already mentioned that so whatever the relationship is, then we also look at proactively of what additional information we can pass on, which can give more sense to this entire relationship. So that is the thing what we have done for having a more engaging relationship. And as Raj said, that we have to have a year-on-year basis sort of thing. It has to be a strategic, not a 1 year or a short-term sort of a relationship. And there is where the attempt what we are making now is to go with a clear-cut understanding of what we are expecting out of them. At the same time, we want them also to understand that it should not be a one-off sort of a situation, but it has to be a year-on-year where actually we can demonstrate the impact what they want to look at.
Great.
I think to quote something very specific, I think there is a lot of education required both the sides, right? Because this is for the first time that there is a huge impetus for NGOs to work with corporates and corporates to work with NGOs. So for example, we were reviewing one of the spreadsheet, and we pay about 350 rupees per day for the trainers who are training our children in the school. So the first question by the person who was reviewing the grant: why do you need to pay 350 rupees in a village? And which is very relevant question, because below poverty line is defined as 35 rupees a day, and otherwise. But on the other hand, Narega pays 300 rupees a day. So who is going to work for me if you are unemployed and getting paid 300 rupees a day by the government itself? So, but that particular comparison, that Narega is 300 rupees a day. So unless I pay at least that much, I'm not going to get anybody worthwhile to work for me. That is education, right? I can't blame that grant maker not knowing that Narega is 300 rupees, per day. So I think there's a lot of back and forth like that, and at the same time, NGOs being able to stand firm on their ground, that this is what it is and these are what the ground realities, will help. In other case, the grant maker did not agree to that kind of salary structure. We said, fine, we have to pay this much. You contribute whatever you need to contribute, other money will bring in. That doesn't mean we are going to change our project budget or anything, like that, but we have to pay whatever we have to pay, because I can't change my model because this is how much you are agreeing to for the per day, this thing. So I think that way there is a back and forth between the two, and somewhere it arrives that I'm sure this is the transition phase, right? And within 1 or 2 years or 2-3 years, once more and more people get educated in the space, it will sort of change over a period of time.
Great. Kalyani, did you want to build on that? or should we? No? Great, thanks guys. So we'll open it up to the floor for questions. I think we have a few mics moving around, so just feel free to raise your hands and the mic will come to you.
Hello everyone, I am from Mastic Foundation. Do I need to reintroduce myself again? Yeah. My name is Joshua Shri and I am from Mastic Foundation. I have a question to Raj. See, every one of you said your challenges with working with corporates, and now I'll share my challenge with working with a non-profit. What has happened? What you said that everyone wants to clear their fund by 31st. But in Mastic Foundation, what we have done, we have said that unless and until we receive a report, we are not going to clear the check. So this is what we have done, and this is a huge challenge for us. We don't get the reports firstly on time, and then the format which we share with them, we don't get the formats accordingly. And sometimes the case studies and the pictures and all, they are same. There's the names are different and this is same. See, I have worked for an NGO. I am a social development professional working for this field for the past 6-7 years. And I really feel this is a challenge. So what do you need to say about this? And what you said is educate both the side. When you say the corporates are pressing on them all these facts, but I also feel that corporates do understand NGOs. They always do not press their viewpoint on the NGOs, but this is what I've really felt. Firstly, they don't understand what you're saying. They miss appointments. They just merely miss appointments. This is what I have seen. So what you have to say? Actually, I have another question for you also. So what do you like to say? Like, share all my questions or one by one?
The way you are going, let me answer this first.
And be careful, Raj. Oh my God.
No, first of all, I apologize on the basis of, on behalf of those NGOs who have missed appointments, because one should not, regardless. No, I think, as I said, see, this NGO sector has been, operating for a long time, right? And typically it has been under grant funding and, long this thing, where this kind of structured reporting is much more long term, 6 months or a year, not a monthly cycle or not a quarterly cycle, right? So that is one thing. So essentially in any project budget, Parvez referred to the, capacity building budget, right? The thing is that in order to provide right type of report to you, and I'm not making an excuse again, in order to provide right type of report, in order to provide right type of stories, in order to provide you right type of high resolution 3 MB, pictures for your annual report, I need somebody who is a graphic designer, I need somebody who can understand database, I need somebody who can analyze data and come up with the report you want. But at the same time, NGOs being told nothing more than 10% of overhead allowed in the program, right? And we also know very well all this, how much these people cost, at the same time. So luckily at Lend a Hand, we have been able to raise some unrestricted funding and pay for these, these kind of things. But we also have to understand that the NGO, at the same time, we are also pushing them to deliver the program at the cost per beneficiary, which is the metric I hate actually. Because everybody say, okay, give me a cost per beneficiary below 100 rupees. So now I'll go and adjust my budget and, show 100 rupees and then, okay, I can give it now, right? So I think it's not that NGOs would not like to report. It is not that NGO would not like to, it is both ways. And that's why I said the capacity building effort is one of the most important aspect, in that case. Two, so that even NGOs can have a resource to manage their databases, resource to, write their communication report, resource to sort of develop the stories and other things and being provide for it, right? Even at us with, all these resources and me with corporate background and all that, we have had hard time finding somebody with communication background ready for the salary that we offer, So in a way, I would say if any of you guys who have such a big communication marketing department, and if you can spare, 1 day a week, be my guest, I would love to, and then provide everything I want, right? Yeah. So it is both ways. I'm not sort of trying to make excuses or anything, but it is a reality, right? Because at the end of the day, as Parvez said, we are working in some remote village in Rajasthan, and most of the staff is program staff, which is not used to this kind of marketing, which is not used to this kind of report writing, which is not used to sort of, corporate ways of working. So there's a, the capacity building at the both end, and I know I'm beating that word to the death now, the capacity building, but that's what it is, right, at the end of the day.
So do you think that trained people with well qualification needs to be there in the NGO sector?
Absolutely.
So, but I have felt that these people are lacking in this. When I deal with these NGOs, no, they are lacking in this sector. It may be my case to case, maybe my experience. It may not be everyone's experience, but it is in my experience. This is what I felt. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sonia. I'm from Ambuja Cement Foundation, and we are registered separately as an NGO. Also, we are the CSR arm of Ambuja Cement Limited. So the concerns which you have raised is something that I handle communication, so I myself face. So when we talk to the field people, I would never get reports the way I would want. I would never get photographs the way I want. But now, after 20 years of existence, it has kind of started falling into place, because when I am sitting in the coordination office, I have my director telling me who reports to the corporate, that she would want it in a particular way. But I think it's a very educational process for the NGO and for the corporate as well. Now, since we have our presence in Mumbai office and we are very closely related with the corporate, we have people from the company coming in and visiting our villages, so they know, whatever we say is actually happening. But that might not be the case with all the NGOs. So I feel it's a very educational process and it kind of builds. And NGO sector has been a very fragmented. I mean, it's not that they don't work, but it is a fragmented sector, and now it's kind of, this is what I feel, I might be wrong, now it's kind of getting concretized. So yeah, I think these challenges is something which would surely be addressed with time. It just takes education.
Thank you so much. We had a question up front here.
Yeah. This is more to do with, open to all three of you, as to when you go to pitch to a client, with a corporate client, right? What are the things that you would go with? In the sense, this is actually a similar question on the lines that, when people, in the past, probably 3 months, I had about 6, different NGOs come and talk to us, and all of them come with different level of preparedness. So you seem to be much experienced in this space. So what would you go in with? Like when you are approaching a client, which is a corporate client, they are going to provide the funding. So what would you go in with? Do you go in with just an annual report and a brochure?
I wish.
Simpler like that.
Besides this experience on goal, we've approached corporates even for our other care initiatives. And I think what's important, what we've done is actually we've done a lot of homework also. Because it's not about, just because there are 10, 20 corporates in the room, it's not that everybody would fit the calls. It's also important to say where are the synergies are. What is it that we are running in terms of a program? What interests the corporate too? And where do you see the communication? So for us, it's not that we will go hit and 20 and say, let's try everywhere. So this thing of finding out what are their interests, how have they done in the past, which are the geographies they are interested in also. I think it makes sense for the corporate to be interested in the same state where you have your programs too. So that piece is definitely done. There's also, for us it's been difficult to have a person resource allocated specifically for this, like a fundraising person. But definitely we realized that, like what she said, there's a disconnect if you're going to go with just an annual report and the person is expecting a presentation. So we've had to work on it where we have our clear PowerPoint presentation is ready, which says, testimonials too. And also when we reach a stage where the corporate needs to see the program, so we have had people coming visiting and a team. In fact, our interactions with Dasra, they are supporting us with this, that what is the visit which the corporate is looking at. They do interact with beneficiaries, understand perspectives, because even some portion of the program can be funded. You don't have to look at not even only funding. It could be an interaction or engagement over one aspect of the program. So I think it is not about one communication, one interaction, but preparing for those interactions and understanding what they're expecting. So if someone says, we want to see the last 5 years, the annual reports of 5 years. We also have a very intense due diligence process. What we've realized is that for any other corporate as an NGO, getting our due diligence ready. So, you know, any corporate who says, how have your last 5 years looked in terms of impact, financials, narratives? We've put in a lot of work, and I think just to build on what she said, sending a few of our staff to programs like what Dasra is running for social impact, to understand that yes, you're doing hard work, how do you professionalize it? How do you actually bring out and capture the essence? You know, because sometimes you're not able to communicate it. So for us, many of us in our organization have gone through such programs. So now we are in a better position to communicate with the corporate and also understand their expectations.
And just to add to your, you know, as far as we go, I even look up which college the CEO went to, you know, and so apart from that, we look at, you know, the first round of homework is what are the focus areas, you know, is it education, is it domestic violence, is it disability, is it whatever, right? And if there is a primary match between them, then only we'll go, and once there is a primary match, then are we going to fit within the indicators they are looking for, you know, because even within livelihood, even within employment, even within, you know, whatever empowerment, so to say, it has many shades, right? And are we going to fit into that state? And we have never tried to retrofit our program into that, because that will like putting, you know, circle into a rectangle. You may get money, but it doesn't work, you know, in a full-time way, right? So, and we actually have been very selective in approaching corporates, because when we know that this is going to be a multi-year thing, this is going to be geographical, you know, match, as Kalyani said, and other things too, then we should, you know, go for it as compared to otherwise, right? And plus, I myself come from the corporate background, so all our PowerPoint are in bullet points rather than words. Because we know that, you know, it will not go beyond, you know, 4 bullets on a 4 bullet points on a PowerPoint, not 10 slides in a deck. You know, so we have been very careful with that as well, right?
So we have been mindful of that tolerance level, you know, when we actually interact now. But what we have started doing is now talking more about outcomes. That whatever investment is going, whatever money is going, what are ultimately this particular NGO is going to achieve. And we make a pitch, you know, of relating whatever investment is to the outcomes and not to the inputs or outputs. And there is where, you know, it has become very easier for us to engage with every stakeholder, be it corporate or, you know, development agencies, where it becomes easier for them setting up the expectations. And it is very clear of, you know, at the end of the term, what are we going to achieve, what we are going to deliver, and how it is going to be communicated back to all the stakeholders. So it makes things simpler for us.
Okay, thanks. We have a few more minutes before we all break for lunch. Any other questions around the room? Yep, there's one in the middle.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Bosco, and I have a question. It's pretty generic. How do you determine a particular beneficiary? Or what I mean to say is there a criteria when you define a beneficiary? And the reason I'm asking you this is today the term disadvantaged and underprivileged has been used so widely that it's really difficult for us to actually figure out. Just to share a simple example, while we were conducting a medical camp, these kids have become so equipped in knowing what to say in order to get a particular tonic that they come up over there and they say, okay, this is what I'm suffering with, and immediately they get the tonic. So, do you use a criteria when you select a particular beneficiary?
Yeah.
Kalyani, do you want to take it ahead?
No, in our case, we choose a school, and all the students in that school are part of the program. You know? So we don't, I mean, it is, and even those schools are on self-selection basis, because we don't want to impose the program on the school. Most of the time, it is the schools which are approaching us, and then we work with them. You know, and whoever is studying in the 8th, 9th, and 10th grade in that particular school becomes, you know, the student, right? In general, but to answer your question, I think most of the non-profit program will have a target beneficiaries, right, for that. And then it's probably matter of, you know, which geography and how concentrated you are, or are you doing carpet, you know, bombing or something like that. That's what will matter, right?
Yeah, we've had, in fact, the program that we run, which talks about, you know, the bodily changes, menstrual hygiene, sexuality, peer pressure, is very relevant even to the advantaged schools. Even the schools that my children go to, the teachers don't want to talk about these issues. So, having said that, though there is a need for the program in advantaged situations, we are very clear that those children have access to information in other sites, whether it's at home or internet or their families and their school, you know, their peers. So we're very clear that we will work only in municipal school settings and partnering with other organizations who are working in slum communities. So we have to actually define to say we are clear that it's economic disadvantage that we're talking about, and also the kind of the family earnings that is there. So that's, we would not run a program in a private advantage school for sure. So there is a definition.
But
there.
just to not build on exactly, but actually we are just introduced a program in Mumbai right now in Shishu 1 and Amulak.
Yeah.
Now I need to introduce the program in Shishu 1 because if I do it in Shishu 1, which is sort of model school, the other schools will aspire to be for having that. It sort of is a validation of the program that a school like Shishu 1 is doing this. So there are various consideration in how do you choose the schools, but there can be other things too, right?
So we have a specific target of out-of-school girls. So the girls who is not accessing school, at all, or the girls who have dropped out. So we have a specific definition of those to engage people with us. So we haven't faced that.
Sure. But I guess the point is also, I guess, in the presentations or in the pitch, having some kind of way to understand how the organization actually defines the beneficiary and what might be the selection process, for example, is something that would be useful, and organizations that have effective engagements are already doing that. Can we get one last question from the crowd? Yeah, one in the middle over there.
Yeah, hi, this is Bharat Dave from Fossil. My question is to Parvez and Raj. See, I have come across with a recent case where two girls who were studying in 6th and 8th standard, and they left their study because they didn't had anyone to earn in their family. So in that case, what do you recommend? Because the question is not they really interested to go in school, but the question is livelihood. They want to earn, and they are earning 120 rupees a day. So what is the solution for that?
No, so I mean that's a ground reality, right? I wouldn't say that I can stop girls dropping out of the school because they don't have money to pay for the food, and that's the hardship. There is nothing. I mean, I don't think NGOs can address that, right? Because then the question is, should the NGO start feeding the parents or anything? That's not going to happen. That's why something which we are doing is that while they are going to school, they are getting skills. So because both are important, right? As we are saying that going to school is important, getting the certificate of 10th grade is important, but at the same time getting the practical skills, is important as well. Now there can be NGOs which can be working in the sector which can work with the parents to make them understand. But that's not our field, but I'm sure there are NGOs which are working in the field which can work with the parents to make them understand that they should not get girl, take out of the school and make them work just to feed for the family. But then, there are hard realities which we are not aware about. So who am I to speak, like that, right?
Yes, I think those are very specific cases. But at wherever we are, we could arrest, we are doing that. So for example, we are facing a lot of migratory problems. So we are working in Rajasthan, and there are many families who migrate from one place to another, keeping their businesses in mind. And we engage with the parents and put their kids into the residential schools. And that is working well with us. And wherever we have found people who are not able to meet their livelihood, we engage with them and try to explain the importance of education along with understanding their trouble, and probably wherever possible we refer such cases to the local NGO available there, or probably to the district administration, and that is how we try to tackle this.
So just to summarize, a few things that I noted down while we were talking is what seems to be the theme, both in terms of what the three entrepreneurs here were saying as well as the questions that were being asked, is that there is this onus, and now there's almost this increased onus or pressure for better communication to ensure that the relationships between NGOs and corporates become stronger, that the engagements become deeper, because also with the CSR law there will be, as Deval said, a lot more funding potentially flowing through these channels, right? So in order to do that, some of the points that came up were, of course, taking the time at the beginning to set expectations up front, and in establishing the ground rules, understanding on both ends what really the programs are about, what is the impact the organizations are trying to create, but also what are the goals that the corporates are trying to reach, and what really is that area for alignment, but also where are the areas where there is an alignment, and how can the organizations then go about meeting those needs. The need for strong monitoring and evaluation, I think, is almost a subset of this, because a lot of setting the ground rules is also understanding and setting expectations for what can the corporates expect 6 months down the line, or a year down the line, or even every quarter if that's what the reporting requirement is. But within that, also understanding the non-financial needs that organizations may have in fulfilling some of those reporting requirements beyond the obvious stuff like numbers and so on, which we all always put into Excel sheets and calculate and send across, but things like having high quality photographs and good quality case stories that actually relate to what the program is about, and that's where there may be more of an opportunity for support from the corporates again in actually building those capacities within the organization. So with that, I'd like to thank my panelists, and thank you all for being a great crowd. Yeah.
Thank you.